What I loved about this book was the emotional availability of the characters, especially Eli, who is the kind of voiceover narrator of the book. It was just such a compelling story, and I just felt immediately so connected to the characters. I have 3 brothers of my own, and so a lot of those relationships and a lot of those dynamics that are in the book I really related to, and it also was really funny and a really fresh take on the time period. At one point it was being considered that I play another character in the story, and well, I was a lot fatter at the time, so it was very clear that I should play the fat one. I don't think I know anyone who has as perfect a record as Jacques. Every single one of his films, whether you identify with the story or not, or whether it's your type of movie, is one thing, but you can't deny the quality of the acting and the filmmaking from film to film. He has, in my view, a perfect record. I really trusted Jacques right from the beginning because he was so specific, and he has an incredible bullshit detector. So you get used to being really ruthless with yourself about authenticity and honesty and really trying to connect with the material from moment to moment. Their kinship is trauma, I would say. You know, the brothers, this relationship, you know, when they were born, began as a perfectly normal brotherly relationship, sibling relationship, and then they go through this horrible trauma, and that shaped and forged the dynamic of what they're like together, and then they set off on this life of violence. It's very symbiotic, and that it's completely codependent, and that it's almost like one person, and they're joined together. He and I had never talked about, well, this is what the brothers are like. We just started spending time together, and the only deliberate choice was, I'm going to be with him as much as I can. We'd go for walks up to this statue at the top of this hill in Almeria in Spain, and we'd walk for an hour and a half and literally not say one word to each other, but just be there with each other, bearing witness to each other's existence, sensing each other's needs and energy. That's been a lot of the experience with Joaquin, and by extension, Eli and Charlie, you know. John Morris is the sort of scout. He's the person that the Commodore hires to go to a place, find the people that need to be killed, and then he gives all that information to me and Charlie, and we go and execute them. It turns out he ends up being kind of an idealist. When he meets Hermann Warm, he's someone who's on the leading edge of human evolution of the time. So when people who are ready for a change come across him, he has this magnetic effect on them, and they realize, oh my gosh, there's something different in the future, and this guy knows it, and they fall under his spell. It's about what does it mean to be in relationship with someone? What are you guilty of, and what do you owe someone as a result of that guilt? And what it's like to move through life with someone, and what are the costs of that, and what are the pleasures of that, and what does that mean?
Hermann Warm always sees the best in people, and he's not just someone who's also always finding the gold, you know, in the landscape around him, but he's always trying to kind of bring out the gold in people. And sometimes he's a bit trusting. He tells too many people about this, and it means that, you know, he ends up being chased. In a way, the story is about the California gold rush, but there are a lot of parallels with technology and the current, you know, world that we're living in. He's really a kind of founder of a startup heading to San Francisco with this, you know, with this kind of oversized brain and oversized optimism. There were all these kind of, you know, interesting thinkers coming out of Europe who wanted to start these communes and these ideal societies that were all about division of labor, equal wages, that you didn't have to get married, you could be gay, you could be straight, and it was about pursuing your passions and trying to, you know, live a good life together. Quite early on when I spoke to Jacques, it became very clear that he wanted me to try and take this character of Hermann Warm and you know, take the essence that Jacques and Thomas distilled into the screenplay and kind of make it my own. You know, in many ways, this is an adaptation. It's not a retelling of the novel. So I'd like to think there's an essence of that character that's been preserved. You know, this is the kind of group of lost boys, really, who are all kind of fathering each other, and it's this kind of dysfunctional family by the end of it. Jacques one of my favorite film directors. I think, you know, many people see him as one of the finest, you know, directors working in the world today. He always wants to push you to just try something different. You know, he doesn't even want the thing to stagnate. It's not that he's trying to drive towards one image in his mind that he's preconceived. It's actually that he just wants to keep pushing and prodding the thing and seeing how it mutates and how it might evolve. It's quite an open, fluid, dynamic process. And I personally love that. It's really interesting to see how that early kind of socialism or early kind of communism wasn't a really dry, intellectual, kind of systematic way of thinking. It was really a kind of quite a romantic movement that was pushing against modernity and mechanization and industrialization. It was about kind of connecting with your fellow man and, you know, trying to embrace everything with love. So I found it really inspiring. Warm is a kind of character who, you know, he's young, he's brilliant, he knows he's created an invention that can change the world, he's proud of that, but really he is a lonely guy and he wants to connect with people out of a sense of both his idealism, his optimism, but also his kind of loneliness. He takes risks in reaching out to people and connecting with people. If you think about it, he kind of connects with all the wrong people, but somehow his openness and his honesty and his idealism become kind of infectious. One of the coolest things about this production is when you go into the costume department, there's people speaking in French, Spanish, Italian, English. It feels great to be working on a film set where there's people of all different nationalities. The need to find some purpose and to try and find purpose through connection with other people, and how difficult it can be to do that in a world that's set up to try and divide people from each other, in a world that's driven by greed. It's about how do we try and overcome those structures that keep us apart and connect, because that's really the only thing that's going to make us happy in the end, I think.
I was quite impressed about like a Western movie, more like you follow, it's almost a road movie where you follow two actors walking and discussing together. And so, I don't know, I was interested about that also. Challenging thing on this project, I think it's because the project is quite intense. And I think, for example, with the gaffer, we have to organize every day. It's especially now in Romania, we have to prepare like a big set in terms of lighting and everything. But every day it's another big set, and so that means we have to, during the time we shoot on one, we have to prepare the other one. But for example, for me, I'm unable to see the other set because the next day we shoot on that one. So it's something a bit more difficult for me. Usually you have the time to go to take a look quickly and come back, and because the sets are closer, or you have more time also. And on this project it's a bit more challenging, yeah. And with Michel, we were trying to find, before, you know, during the prep, to find also a palette of colors for the inside or the outside. I think for Jacques it was important also to have some colors, not to be like a black and white Western movie, so have some rich colors. And when we did some tests, sometimes the colors was a bit too intense, even for Milena, for the wardrobe. So we decided to go a bit less and maybe to adjust later in post-production, just to be able to select the right colors and not to start to be too kitschy, for example, with the colors. Because, for example, the city, if you have too much colors on the wall and everything will be a bit more too much, I think, in terms of color, yeah. it's more like, let's see, by instinct. I don't know, it's more like we go, for example, even, I don't know, I take the camera on my shoulder, and we go and we try to catch the good moment with the actors. So usually the old Western was more like a classical, I don't know, with traveling, with track, with long shot, very static. And here it's more, I think, to follow the action, to follow the actors and be with them. And for example, we are using like a big crane, you know, to set up some light. And I know everybody hates those cranes, the production, Jack and everybody. And for me, it's quite, it's not very easy because each time I see this crane, and I think this is amazing the way we are trying to do it. But I start to feel bad because of that. And I think this is my first time when I'm shooting a movie where everybody hates techniques, but it's more like it become like a big joke, I think, on the set now. Yeah.
I was making a film that Patrick DeWitt had written that was being directed by Asa Jacobs, who's a mutual friend. And in the course of that project, I found out that Patrick had just finished his second novel. We'd been looking for a Western for John to do. The conversations deepened and the trust was building, and we decided to partner on the film. I think there's a logic to approaching a foreign director for what can be perceived as an American, American material, like a Western. I think you can argue that a foreigner brings that doesn't carry cultural baggage with them when they approach, this kind of material, and they also bring a really fresh eye. And I think with Jacques, that was, completely 100% true. I think there's an emotional intensity to the material, and I think there was an intensity to shooting outside in the elements all day, and I think everyone's connection to the material and connection to each other just created a really really critical, it just felt critical every day, so that, yeah, there are challenges and surprises every day, but there was also this incredible connection, it's deep, familial, exploring familial relationships is the central heart of the movie are these brothers, and such a primal relationship. I almost think of it like, they're these two brothers and they're on a plane and, they're connected. And, one is up, the other is down, the other is up, the other is down. There's always trying to find some equilibrium, but there's just this internal competition. And in the moments where they do find balance and equilibrium is, the moments when they can pull a gun in an instant and they read each other's minds, or when they find humor or laugh at the same thing. And those moments are really sort of beautiful. Well, it's the Wild West is an enduring, construct. It could be the Wild West of anything. It could be the Wild West of technology or space. I think what's so attractive about it is it's expansive. We by nature we are obsessed with freedom and maybe the prospect of prosperity, and these landscapes offer just endless opportunities to look at that. We're attracted to freedom and the prospect of prosperity, but we lose our minds. Like, we'll forsake ourselves, we'll forsake our brothers. We create heroes. We crave. We do crazy things in the face of that energy. So I think the Western is the simplest form to tell these really elemental stories about ourselves. Initially, we had been casting for someone who was, in their 40s, red-headed, tall, like the description in the book. And he just, in a moment, realized that Warm needed to be young, like a young genius, like a young Mozart, and that Morris's character would be inspired to follow him, but also, might feel a need to protect him. And that was a real revelation and eventually led us to casting Riz Ahmed. But, it also helped in Jacques' idea that the brothers, represent the past, and the two, and Morris and Warm might represent the future. And as they move towards each other, all those characters, learn something about themselves, and change is complicated and change is messy. So it's interesting.
Well, I approached the writing of a Western in a roundabout way. It began really as an exercise in dialogue. And I wrote this scene that I didn't think would necessarily go anywhere, which is two brothers. Actually, they weren't even brothers in the beginning. It was just two men on horseback. I thought it would be, a couple of pages, but then the pages started adding up as 15, 20 pages. There was just an energy to it. And, as a writer, whenever that occurs, you follow it to its completion. But I didn't have that many touchstones because of my unfamiliarity with the genre. So I was sort of, I was on my own quite a lot, which was intimidating at times, but I think that's ultimately preferable. When you've got it all set out for you, then there's less a chance that something unexpected will occur. So my not really knowing what a Western was supposed to do, what I was supposed to accomplish, I think wound up shaping the book in a way and making it more personal. I think my work generally lends itself to the screenplay format, to the film format, because it's very chatty. I tend to write scenes rooted around dialogue, and the story is usually told around what people are saying to one another. And then I think Westerns, too, when we think of Westerns, at least in the States, we think of film more so than literature. I wasn't necessarily thinking of it as a film when I was working on it, but of course it came to my mind from time to time, because some of the scenes reminded me of, they were scenes that I could see on a screen already, It's a strange experience to see your book interpreted by somebody else, but I was always sort of comforted by the fact of Jacques being such a masterful director. So even if there was a moment here and there where I didn't quite get what he was going for, you have to have faith in the people that you work with, and I have all the faith in Jacques. To trigger sympathy in a reader, they need to care for the people in some way, or have some sort of empathy for them. So Eli in the book is so forthcoming about what he's afraid of, and what he doesn't like about himself, what he doesn't like about his life, what he doesn't like about Charlie. So I think it's hard not to have some sympathy for his character. In spite of the ugliness of his work, he is a very empathetic person and well-meaning, but his vulnerability, I think, is the key to caring for Eli's character, is recognizing sort of his innate sweetness and his loneliness. He's a very lonely person, and I think that that's something that most anybody can relate to. Yeah, the Commodore is this sort of mysterious figure, and he is the Eli and Charlie's employer. So this is a man who wields extreme power and is merciless, and if anybody gets in his way, he hires Eli and Charlie to come and take care of that person and just get rid of them. It's never really quite clear who he is or where he's from or how he became the way he is, but he's sort of representational of a certain type. The Commodore is representational of a certain type of American ambition.
I was very impatient to read the script because it was so unexpected to have Jacques shooting a Western movie. So then when I read the script the first time, to me it was very mysterious, like a surprise, because it was like a long road movie, brotherhood, violence, almost no women, so it was very surprising. My way is to spend a long time, a long evolution from the very beginning of preparation until the shooting. And everybody will get in tune. When I say everybody, it's Jacques, director, the DOP, wardrobe designer, and so there is like a long process that gives birth before the launching, before the shoots. I also have like a vision of the whole global design, but at the same time, this vision is like a little out of focus. And slowly, step by step, heading to the shooting, it will be more and more and more focused. The Commodore is our character that we see very little in the movie. He's very mean and terrible and a threat all along the movie, but we don't see him mostly. And for this specific set, Jacques was really requesting something like Gothic. So it was not my first idea, because Gothic in Oregon in 1850, it's a little twist historically, but Jacques was really clear on this. He was seeing the steep roofs and ornaments, etc. I wanted to start to work on this house, but then the people of the stage, they told me that this house was in so bad condition that there was no option to rehab it, and we had to strike it down. And so at last we did build a new mansion. We have this sequence with a Blount's farm, which is the very beginning of the movie. Like we have in the night, total black. We see just a gunfight with long flames from the revolvers, from the Colts, and then it appears that there is a house, and then there is a barn, and then the barn will be in flame, a big fire in the barn. So in the first place, I did design a house, like the house on the hill, and then you have a barn which is a little lower, huge barn, like the Canadian or American barn. Talking with Jacques, he said, but I will never see the barn from the house. So at this point I said, okay, we can do all-in-one. Let's stick the house in the back of the barn, and then so we can manage to have the stunt action of the beginning in the house. And then the next day we burn the barn, and we burn the barn, we burn the house, but we are done.
Hey, Vali here. Did you like the video? Did you know it was based on a book? Hollywood often turns to novels and non-fiction books for movie ideas, but sometimes the films are so popular that they overshadow their source material. Here are some famous movies you might not know were based on books. Die Hard was based on the book Nothing Lasts Forever by Roderick Thorp. Full Metal Jacket was based on The Short Timers by Gustav Hasford. The There Will Be Blood story was taken from Oil by Upton Sinclair. Ben Affleck's The Town was based on the book Prince of Thieves by Chuck Hogan. What's your favorite movie based on a book? Let me know in the comments below, and see you next time. Bye bye.